Okay, good morning, everyone, and welcome to our virtual roundtable on recent federal immigration policy developments and what they mean for Maryland employers and our workforce. I'm Mary Kane, President and CEO of the Maryland Chamber of Commerce, and we're glad to have so many of you joining us for this very timely conversation early on in the legislative session. We appreciate our partnership with the Governor's Office in making today's program possible, and we're grateful for their commitment to helping Maryland businesses navigate rapidly evolving federal policies. And while immigration policy is primarily driven at the federal level, the operational impacts are very real for Maryland employers, from compliance requirements to workforce availability. And today's discussion is designed to offer clarity and practical guidance at a moment when many businesses are seeking it. And we're honored to be joined today by Senator Will Smith, Delegate Ashanti Martinez, Secretary Kevin Addix, Kamal Essaheb, Senior Advisor and Director of Immigrant Affairs at the Governor's Office of Community Initiatives, and Kelly Dunning, Partner at Berry, Appleman, and Leiden. But before we begin, just a few quick notes. Please use the question and answer function to submit questions at any time. Senator Will Smith will open with brief remarks, followed by Delegate Martinez. Then Secretary Addix and Kamal Essaheb will discuss the economic impacts on workforce, followed by Kelly, who will review what employers should be looking out for. Then, if time allows, we will close with some audience question and answers. This webinar is being recorded and will be shared with all registrants later this week. And with that, Senator Smith, thank you very much for joining us. The floor is yours.
Hey, thank you. Good morning or good afternoon almost, everyone. And Mary, thank you for your leadership and your partnership with us. I've just been really honored to work with you over the last couple of years, and I think you all have done amazing things under your leadership and your tenure. So I just want to say thank you very much for that, and I'm looking forward to continuing our work this session. As Mary mentioned, I'm chair of the Judicial Proceedings Committee, and we had a number of pieces of legislation that I think will have an impact on the immigrant population, but also just the general psyche of Marylanders as we move forward under this current administration. But I always like to frame things with just immigrants in general. Maryland, we have about 6.5 million people, but nationally, there are roughly 342 million people in the United States, and there are about 49 million immigrants. And I always think about how to become a citizen, you go through a process, and part of that process is an immigration test. And that test you'll be given 100 questions. You'll be asked 10. You've got to get 6 correct, and 91% of first-time test takers will pass on the first time. They gave that same test to 3.5 million Americans across the United States. And I always think about this. You know what percentage of people passed on their first try? Americans, native-born Americans. Well, in only one state did a majority pass on the first time, and it was not Maryland, unfortunately. It was Vermont. But it says something about immigration and how people come to this country to seek opportunity and to contribute mightily to our experiment. In Maryland, in particular, immigrants make up about 16% or 16.7% of our population, but they make up 21% of our labor force. Immigrants are over 50% of the workforce for things like carpenters, home health aides, and housekeepers. 23% of registered nurses are immigrants, and 23% of our STEM labor force are comprised of immigrants. So immigrants contribute mightily to not only the fabric and the character of our state, but also to the population. Immigrants paid $13.3 billion in federal and state and local taxes in Maryland, and have a spending power of $33 billion for Maryland. So it's really an economic driver. And I remember we had a hearing earlier this week about our housing shortage. We're about 100,000 units short of housing in Maryland. A lot of that is for obviously tariffs and external drivers, but a lot of it is also because of our labor force is being shrunk because of the current immigration policy. So in Maryland, Just yesterday, the governor took some historic steps with signing a piece of legislation that got rid of something called the 287G program, which requires cooperation with federal immigration enforcement. Uh, if for the jurisdictions that have signed up for those agreements. The reason why we did that is to ensure that our immigrant population was not fearful of our state and local law enforcement and interfacing with them to solve violent crimes. We want everyone to feel safe interfacing with law enforcement, and these agreements drove people underground, away from healthcare, getting healthcare, away from schools, away from work. And so, under this environment, we took that historic step, and the governor signed that piece of legislation into law just yesterday. So, with that framing, I just say thank you very much, Mary, and I will turn it over and stand by for questions after the panel speaks. But it's an honor to be here with you all, and I'm looking forward to the discussion ahead.
Thank you so much, Senator Smith. I have to tell you, my parents are both immigrants, and I remember the day that my mother came home after she passed her test with her American flag. It was so exciting. But thank you so much for joining us, and we really appreciate our partnership with you also. So now I'm pleased to welcome Delegate Ashanti Martinez. Please take it away, Delegate.
Thank you so much, Mary and the Chamber, and thank you everyone for joining us this morning to talk about a topic that is truly so very important for the moment we're in right now. For those that are unfamiliar, I'm Maryland State Delegate Ashanti Martinez. I have the honor and privilege of serving as chair of the Maryland Legislative Latino Caucus. I became chair the day after the Key Bridge fell. And so my chairmanship has been tagged along to some of the biggest struggles we've seen in recent history for not just Marylanders, but our immigrant neighbors in particular. When you look at the tragedy of the Key Bridge and you look at the impacts of the people who perished on that bridge, they were immigrants. Oftentimes, immigrants are the ones who are out laboring for whether it's for our comfort or overall commerce. These folks come here for opportunity and really just a pathway to thrive. And Maryland has always been a welcoming state to include all of our neighbors. And right now, federal policy is making that really difficult. The uncertainty that is coming from whether it's the White House or what I like to call the chaotic Congress leaves business leaders like yourselves in limbo. And that limbo is really detrimental to building and making sure that we here in Maryland can build out an economy that really works for all of us. I also have the privilege in the House of serving as your majority whip. And in this role, we are highly focused on the Speaker's agenda on affordability, accountability, and opportunity for all Marylanders. And when we say all Marylanders, we truly mean every single person's here in our state. And that includes immigrants, making sure that we're doing things like the senator mentioned, like passing the 287G prohibition so that we can have our law enforcement really focused on building community trust and not being deputized to be part of this federal deportation machine. Or it's things like unmasking law enforcement or some of the other bills around detention centers that you will see just to make sure that our state is a welcoming state because we want to have policies that match the people here, but also match what we know are our values. Our core values here in Maryland are making sure that folks are protected and feel welcomed. And so as the chair of the caucus, this year in particular, we're laser focused on making sure that our neighbors understand here in Maryland there are pathways to thrive. I think a lot about what is happening at the federal level on a central question that I think many generations are asked to answer, and it is who belongs here? The policies that we pass, whether it's on protections of U visa, whether it's ensuring that folks can actually adjudicate wage theft, whether it is issues along the lines of employment discrimination, whatever it ends up being, ensuring that we have a state that all people feel welcomed in is really important for us to be able to build the economy that we know Maryland wants to have and we know we deserve here, particularly with immigrants serving in mainly our care economy. So they're taking care of our loved ones, the service economy. or in the construction work, we know that these are vital lifelines in order for us as a state to really grow. And so I'm just really appreciative that this session in particular, we are taking a laser focused approach when it comes to looking at how we protect immigrants. I think this is the fastest bill since I've been in the House, the 287G passage that we've had done. And it's because we want to really send a clear message that we understand the assignment, that we understand what's before us, and that we're going to provide some level of clarity where there is chaos. What's happening in Washington is really aggressive immigration enforcement policy across this country. And here in Maryland, we are not immune. I'm sure you've seen a lot of the videos throughout the fall and summer months in the last year of this current administration, and the real terror that our neighbors feel. And it's one of those things that for me as chair of the caucus, I get a lot of phone calls from folks asking how best can they, go to work? How should they send their kids to school? What happens if someone shows up at their door? What are their rights? What are some of the tools here in our state to help them protect them? These are things that we want to be able to work with all of you on as well. And so I am always open to ideas that you all have about how we as a state can move collectively together to ensure that folks really do feel welcomed here and can participate in our economy. And so with that, I'm open to any questions. And I just thank you all again for your interest in what I think is a very important and timely topic. I think you're on mute, Mary.
Sorry, I have a dog back here. I don't want it barking in the middle. So thank you so much for your comments, and please stay on board and we'll have questions and answers at the end as long as you can. And now I'd like to turn it over to Secretary Addix and Kamal Essaheb. Please take it away, gentlemen.
Thank you very much. Really, really appreciate the opportunity to speak, and thank you to the Chamber for organizing this. This is a topic of our times. This is something that is so incredibly relevant, specifically to the agricultural realm. And so I'll kick this off if that's okay, Kamal, or do you want to frame it out?
No, please go ahead and get
Okay.
started, Secretary Addix.
So if we can jump to the next slide, I'll just very, very quick framing things out. As I mentioned, it's an incredible situation that we're in right now. We have got so many immigrants in Maryland that are playing such a key role in the workforce. And I will start broad and I'll then bring it back specifically to the agricultural industry. We can jump to the next slide. So just some top level numbers. 17% of Maryland residents are foreign born. And when you look at what that means and boil it down, 21.7% of labor workforce is made up of immigrants. You can look to the right here and see the top counties in terms of where the immigrants are located. As you can see, they tend to be concentrated as a community in the suburban counties around DC, around Baltimore. But that is not the only place. We've got immigrants and immigrant communities in every corner of the state playing a major role. Our latest numbers of undocumented show that the estimate is around 240,000, which is 22.8% of the immigrant population. Top countries represented are El Salvador, India, China, Nigeria, Guatemala. We can jump to the next slide. Just looking at where, in terms of a workforce, where the immigrants are located, you can read on the left. I won't read through that. But if you look to the right, this is a slide from the Comptroller's office, and those percentages are the percentage of engagement within the community. So US born, those numbers add up. If you go to the bottom and there's a couple rows of the slide that are not showing here, but if you were to go to the bottom, it adds up to 100. So of US born workers, just to give you a reference point, 24.3% of US born workers in Maryland are in educational services and healthcare and social assistance. So that helps you understand how to read this slide. When you look, there is some disparity of foreign-born versus U.S.-born, but there is actually a lot of parity here. Public administration, retail trade, some of these are places where we imagine foreign-born workers to be working, and some it is a bit of a surprise, or certainly was to me. If you go over to the left slide or excuse me, the left side of the slide and some of the talking points, under labor, as of 2022, immigrants represented 16.7 of Maryland's population, but over 21.1% of Maryland's labor force, meaning there is a higher workforce participation among immigrants than there are of US born. Immigrants in the state are twice as likely as US born to work as home healthcare aides, twice as likely to work as physicians and surgeons. And then finally, immigrants are disproportionately represented in both early child care and university professorships. So it dispels some of the belief that foreign-born are strictly the day laborers. Not the case. Next slide. This is where it gets into the agricultural sector, and I left this. We left this large and broad so that we could have a bit of a conversation about it. On our Maryland Eastern Shore, for example, the industry is heavily reliant upon foreign-born immigrant labor, and 15% projected shortage. And much of this is coming due to the end of TPS, where we had significant, in some of our processing facilities, significant representation by TPS workers. And so that just puts a number to it. That's in very rural areas where we have processing of food and agricultural products, and we are heavily reliant in those industries on foreign-born labor. Rural economic strain, if you're losing 15% of your workforce and you do not have ready, viable US-born replacements, there's going to be an economic strain. I will also add that, and it was pointed out earlier by the senator and the delegate, that there is concern not just among our temporary immigrant labor under H-2A and H-2B and also TPS. There is concern among folks who have immigrated, folks who included in those programs and beyond, who by all sense of the standard are legal. They are being heckled, they are being threatened, and not just the perception of that, but actual. And we have heard many a story from our agricultural businesses of their labor unable to go to the grocery store, their labor unable to go pick up their prescriptions, their labor, who are legal, unable to do these things due to being heckled and harassed. And so it is not just the practicality of ICE and enforcement operations. It is the culture that has been allowed to be created around folks who don't necessarily quote unquote look US born. So that is a major concern. I'll get to evolving labor models. So the models are changing significantly. And while we are excited about some innovations and some renovations in workflow and how agriculture is operating, there is still very much a need for human engagement. And so we hear about AI and taking all the jobs. When you're talking about growing things and you're talking about processing food, there will be humans engaged in this for a very, very long time. Just an example of some of the downstream impacts, and I referenced this just a minute ago. Horticulture is a great example. We've got a very, very strong nursery and landscape industry in the state of Maryland, and it is not just located on the Eastern Shore. We've got very large nurseries in some of our top and suburban counties, Montgomery County, Howard County, et cetera. The downstream impacts of what's happening right now cannot be overstated. There are landscape companies who have ground crews who are afraid to go into certain communities because of that culture that has been created and allowed to exist of just the heckling and the harassment of workers, legal workers. And so these impacts, when you can't take your products that you've grown on the Eastern Shore and go place them in Prince George's County or in Howard County or in Hartford County, there is a deep downstream impact that comes back to that business and then in turn to the community. So all very, very important topics, and we appreciate you allowing agriculture to be part of this discussion. So Kamal, I will send it to you.
Thank you, Secretary Addix, for that, and and thank you, Mary, for hosting and organizing this, really important discussion. Next slide, please. So I want to talk a little bit about what we've seen to date when it comes to the impacts of federal immigration policies. I want to start with enforcement. The latest data that exists goes up to October 15th of last year. And so that second line or third line from the top with the September to October 15 weekly average, that's essentially where we are today. We're essentially at about 120 arrests per week, give or take 20 arrests, for immigration enforcement arrests a day. And, as we talk about the number of individuals arrested, keep in mind that, basically 3 out of 4 foreign-born individuals in the state is in the workforce, right? So I think there's a direct translation between these impacts and workforce levels in the state of Maryland. And as you can tell from the chart, these numbers have been increasing, and there's every reason to believe that they will continue to increase over the coming months. Next slide, please. In terms of how the arrests are being done, I think what's a bit unusual is if you look at the pie chart on the left, if you were to look historically, and nationally, you would see generally about half or more than half of arrests are custodial. These are arrests made of individuals who have, committed an offense or being charged of an offense. But I think what you see here is over last year, about 4 out of 5 arrests are in the state of Maryland, are non-custodial. And I think that's important to highlight for 2 reasons. One is, these are, very visible actions that have an effect beyond folks who are arrested and apprehended, right? These would, for example, include arrests made at work sites. And while an arrest at a work site may affect, a couple of people, it has, as you know better than I do, ramifications on the broader workforce. And then, just to kind of underscore, the impact of these enforcement policies, and as you all know, the immigrant workforce and the U.S. born workforce are generally complementary, right? If you have fewer farm workers, it's not, you need fewer farm managers, right? Or if you have fewer delivery workers, you'll see less demand for, the kinds of things that are delivered, right? So fewer restaurant managers or front of the house staff. And I'm oversimplifying here, but there's lots of research that, tends to show sort of the complementariness between immigrant workforce and U.S. born workforce. So when you look at the federal government's immigration policies, research shows that if the federal government achieves its goals on deportation, there will be 3.3 fewer employed immigrants over the next 3 years. And at the same time, there will be 2.6 fewer employed U.S. born workers over that that same period. So these impacts flow, far beyond the individuals that are directly affected. And if we zoom into the state of Maryland, for example, again, assuming the federal government, meets its goals when it comes to deportations, estimates are that there would be 115,000 job losses in the state of Maryland, including 45,000 in the construction sector alone. So these are pretty significant numbers and significant impacts. So pivoting away from enforcement, next slide, please, and touching on just a couple of the other policies, and I know Kelly will speak a lot more to this. I think, I'm sure lots of folks have heard about the travel bans. This suspension of, visa processing for individuals from 75 countries, and relatedly, a pause in benefits issuance for those individuals who are here. I think the two implications to keep in mind are the following. For folks who are, existing workers, for example, who have immigration benefits and EADs, work permits from these countries, those documents remain valid until the original expiration date arrives, unless they're officially terminated by the federal government. And then, of course, for new, pending immigration benefits applications, foreign nationals from these countries, they're subject to a blanket pause. So if you're in that situation, or if you have a worker in that situation, expect lengthy delays. And I'm sure Kelly will speak more to this. Next slide, please. In terms of who is in the state of Maryland, or from these travel ban countries, here are some numbers. This isn't the full list, but these are pretty significant numbers, and upwards of nearly 100,000 individuals who are impacted. Next slide, please. Secretary Addox spoke about TPS. This is a designation that allows individuals from certain countries where the conditions have been determined, they would not allow or enable for their deportation. So this status allows for people to work temporarily and be here temporarily. A lot of these designations have been unwound by the current administration. So, and you see the countries on the list, and there is ongoing litigation for various other statuses, including notably Haiti, which has we in the state of Maryland have a significant Haitian TPS population. I'll speak to that a little bit more in a second. In terms of implications, the bottom line is this: if there's litigation ongoing, TPS holders from the affected countries have valid work authorization. But for those statuses that have been terminated in the list you see below, their work permits have since expired. Next slide, please. I want to speak a little bit about Haiti. We've got a large Haitian population, the Eastern Shore, 8,600 Haitian TPS holders in the state. Vast majority on the Eastern Shore, many working in poultry processing, as Secretary Addox mentioned. And their contributions really to the Maryland's economy go beyond that particular sector. There was a looming termination of TPS for Haitians on February 3rd, and then there was a ruling by a judge essentially staying that termination pending further legal proceedings. And so we're seeing lots of implications from the back and forth, terminate TPS, litigation pause, maybe a different litigation outcome. So we've heard reports of Haitian TPS holders being laid off in anticipation of their TPS termination. We have, dozens of families we're hearing reports of are facing housing instability and homelessness, and impacts on both, the specific sectors like poultry processing, but really on agricultural supply chains writ large. Next slide, please. I'll go quickly through this. Lots of changes on refugee asylee processing, particularly in the wake of the shooting of the National Guard members in Washington, D.C. a couple of months back. I won't go through each, all the details here, but the bottom line here is individuals, unless a specific work permit is revoked, individuals in these status with valid work permits remain authorized to work. Next slide, please. Same with parole. Over the last few years, there have been several parole designations for individuals from Ukraine or Afghans or from Cuba, Haiti, Nicaragua, and Venezuela, and several changes affecting the underlying status that these folks have. I think the thing to keep in mind for the, or I guess the upshot for the parole categories that CHNV parolees are not authorized to work unless they have an alternate legal status that they've secured, whereas at least as of now, and then individuals in the other parole categories, remain work authorized to the duration of the work permit that they have. I'll stop there, and maybe actually before I'll stop, just we've been talking a lot about economic impacts, and we've hit on some data points in our various presentations, but just to kind of drill down on other impacts of the broader federal government's immigration policy. There've been reports that of estimates of a hit of 0.4% to our country's GDP simply as a result of the federal government's immigration policies. And if we zoom in terms of housing specifically, there's been some data showing that the issuance of residential housing permits in the Northeast, for example, has seen a decline of 17%. And that's largely driven by workforce availability. There are other factors as well. So just to kind of bring home how some of these policies that we've talked about through this presentation, really have a direct impact our economy and employers in the state, I think is really worth underscoring here. And I'll stop there.
Kamal, thank you so much for all of that wonderful information. And now I'd like to bring in Kelly Dunning, and she can give us the legal perspective on all of what's happening to our employees and employers.
Great. Thank you so very much. And I'm going to be sharing my screen here. Hopefully you can see that.
Mhm.
And I've got quite a bit of slides here. They're really just more for presentation, and I'm certainly happy to share them afterwards with all the participants. I'll go through them fairly quickly, as many of you know, and as many of the participants on this call have already been chatting about. The worksite enforcement has certainly been a main focus in this current administration, and certainly in this first year. We've all seen the pictures and various incidents that have been going on. And so, we've been talking through, and I know even last year we did talk a little bit about how employers can be prepared. So, this will be a little bit of a repeat for some of you who may have participated last year, but I do have lots of new information to share. So I'll go over the slides quickly, and then of course, leave enough time for some Q&A. I think really important what we've seen from this first year is the preparedness that everybody needs to have. So whether you're a business owner, whether you're a sole practitioner, whether you contract, at the end of the day, it's really about being prepared, not only for you as a company, but also, as we've been talking about already on this webinar, is letting your employees know what type of support is there for you and for them, right? And so part of that is just having that preparedness plan ready and in place. So one of that is really knowing the different visits that can happen. And if you're not a company that sponsors foreign workers, then you may not have as many different moving pieces, right? So you may only have to worry about ICE coming to your front door because they're the only ones that might be looking for somebody that might be working there or a family member. But at the end of the day, if you are a company that does do sponsorship, like whether it's a STEM OPT, whether you have H-1B workers, H-2 workers, you could see any number of agencies coming to your front door asking questions. And so really understanding who it is that's coming to your front door is going to be really, really important. So real quickly, know who and what is involved in the worksite enforcement. So immigration and customs enforcement, that seems to be the most visible one that we all hear about and we're most worried about. There's multiple ways that they would come. The first one is Form I-9 audits. So it's that notice of inspection that they may have, and they want to look at your I-9s and they want to do an audit. This will not have a judicial warrant or an administrative warrant. What they will have is a subpoena. And that subpoena will indicate that in 3 days or 72 hours, you as the employer will need to get all of your I-9s together and provide them over to the government for them to inspect. This does not give them the right to come into your non-public spaces. So if they are issuing you this subpoena to see your I-9s, it doesn't mean that they get to walk in the front door and come into non-private or to your private spaces and take a look at those I-9s. You have the right to say, thank you very much. We will be providing these within 72 hours. And generally it doesn't necessarily mean they need to come back. Oftentimes you're able to email those I-9, the copies of them, or you can sort out a time in which they can come pick those up and make sure that they get them if they're going to be through paper. But just understanding that, it doesn't give them the right to come into your non-public spaces. You have U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services. They are the ones that do site visits for your sponsored employees who are there on H's or L non-immigrant visas. So again, and this is also important, it's really important to ask, for that identification up front so that you know who you're working with. Because if you turn somebody from USCIS away, it could mean that they then ultimately will issue a notice of intent to deny for that worker that you have at your work site because you refused to talk to them. And they did codify that in law last year. Before, it was always just sort of an unwritten rule or a policy, but now it's codified in the regulation, and that was new as of October of this year. So we just really want to make sure, or sorry, of last year. So you really want to make sure that you're asking who this is and the purpose for their visit. And if it's USCIS doing a site visit, an administrative site visit to ask questions about your H&L workers, you want to make sure that you follow up with that officer and provide the necessary information to ensure that that application doesn't get revoked. And then we're going to talk mostly about the enforcement that, Immigration and Customs Enforcement and then CBP have been doing interior. And that's when they come to your front door and they're looking either for a worker or potentially asking for documents that your company may have outside of the I-9 context, right? And so you're really making sure, again, that you're asking for that identification. Okay. What you need to be doing is thinking about all of this in advance, setting up protocols, doing training. It's really, really really important to make sure that you as a company are aligned and prepared and ready. I think that's the one thing, we've been seeing in companies that I've been working with, especially in Minnesota, is when they didn't have these protocols in place, it really is too late to start trying to figure out how you're going to deal with this, how you're going to respond, how you're going to calm your employees. That's a whole nother, aspect of all of this that we've been finding, with this being so visible and with your employees wanting to protect their coworkers and their company. They've also become way more active when it comes to ICE showing up at the workplace. And so, having these protocols in place are going to be really important. As we've always been discussing, and I'm sure many of you have been hearing, Some of these types of things are understanding in your workplace what are public and non-public spaces, making sure those signs are clear. Um, you may even want to put up a sign that says, a judicial warrant is necessary to enter beyond this space. I mean, anything that you need to do to, really outwardly let, any law enforcement officer that's going to be coming, that you're prepared and ready and you're going to be asking questions. Making sure you're training your personnel, your security officers, your front desk people, your managers. If you don't have a front desk person or a security, right? I know many of you are small businesses, or you have businesses that, are outdoors. Somebody on site needs to be trained and understand what the differences is between, who's going to be showing up. And then, of course, as you've all been, hearing in the news and we've talked about last year, what is a judicial warrant? What is an administrative warrant? I think really simple terms is if it's not signed by a judge, it is not a judicial warrant, right? So any other warrant that ICE may bring, if it's signed by a special agent or a special agent in charge, that's the telltale sign that this is not a judicial warrant. And then you as the employer have the right to push back to say, we're not going to allow you into any public spaces. So really understanding, that, and having those protocols in place, right? So like I was saying, assembling your team, making sure you've got that response team and they're ready to go, whether it's your human resources, whether you have legal counsel on site, whether it's, that security person or reception, or just that facilities manager, making sure you as a team, who the team is, they know who's on the team, and you're prepared and ready for when the enforcement action will happen. Okay. So, I think again, once you have that protocol in place, then the next step is what happens when they show up, right? What happens during an ICE visit? So again, really remembering, remain calm, be professional, ask for that identification as we've been talking about. They do need to present that identification. We know that, now news reports have come out, they oftentimes will not. They're relying either on sort of the jackets or the clothing that they're wearing, or I've heard reports of they're just refusing to issue any identification. But again, be prepared for that, right? So you've got your protocols in place. If they refuse to give that identification, then the next step would be, okay, do you have a warrant? And again, if it's that administrative warrant or they refuse to give you a warrant, then again, you have that right to push back to say, thank you very much, but we're not going to be able to allow you into any space today. You can come back with a judicial warrant, and that's fine. But nonetheless, you would not, and make it very clear that you do not consent to them entering any non-public space. The other thing is, I know in other presentations that I've seen or in other discussions or questions that I've received is, what if we take them back to a public, to a conference space, and we have them sit there while we wait for our legal counsel to come, or while we wait for the manager of the facility to come down to talk to them? If your front desk person is not the one who's going to be having that direct contact with that law enforcement officer. One thing I caution employers on is, if that conference space or that waiting area has to go through, or you have to walk them through what would be designated private or non-public space, then you may be waiving your consent to them entering these non-public spaces. So again, just be very, very aware of what is considered to be public space and what is considered to be non-public space in your facilities, so that you, again, and your managers know what they can do, what they can't do. And so, so that you're making sure you're not violating those, or waiving your Fourth Amendment rights. And then of course, not providing anything more to them than what is needed. But to the extent that you can, getting there, if they do provide that documentation, and their identification, making sure that you're making copies, that you're writing down what their names, their badge numbers are, anything you can to gather that information so that you know and keep a record of who is coming to your front door. So like we were saying, and having those protocols in place, like whether it's you're contacting your legal counsel, whether it's going to be the manager, know who on each shift is going to be responsible to go to that front and meet these and meet the law enforcement officers and talk to them and ask them the questions. Document what is happening. Again, it's going to be chaotic. It is going to go very fast. And as we know from reports, they may not provide you with anything. So again, documenting everything that happens, and that means writing it down. If you're able to use a phone to take a video, that is acceptable. Go ahead and video the action and what is happening. And again, everything is just really just trying to document and preserve what's going on so that if they do end up coming into non-public space without your consent, you have all this information so that later on you can then make the determination of if there's any action you can take against the federal agency that came in, most likely whether it's ICE or CBP. One thing is, again, just do not authorize any access to private areas without that judicial warrant. Again, don't argue, don't obstruct. Really making sure that if they push their way in, that you're just documenting everything and you're ensuring that things remain calm. And then of course, trying not to make any sort of inaccurate statements. You don't have to tell them if they're looking for a person. You're not required to tell them whether that person is in today. You're not required to provide any information to those officers if they don't have that judicial warrant, right? But on the same, you don't want to, uh, open up back doors or notify employees that, or that specific employee that they need to, leave the facility immediately. You don't want to be seen as doing anything where you could be considered what the, under the law could be harboring or assisting with that person. So again, there's that fine line of making sure that you're pushing back, you're not granting them any access to where they shouldn't be, but you're also not doing any action that could put you or your company in jeopardy. Okay. And then of course, real quickly after they leave, again, just preparing those statements, making sure that you understand what has happened. You've got all the information so that you can determine if there's any action that can be taken, and coordinating either with your legal counsel internally, or if you have external counsel that you're working with, making sure you're able to communicate with any of the stakeholders, so that they, again, can assess what is happening. But also if there are any arrests that do happen, being able to reach out to the family members of those folks that are arrested, having some sort of protocol in place of how you're going to support that employee, right? Like, finding out, can we find out where that person's being taken to so that you can notify the family members and let them know this is what happened, here's who took them, we've got information that they're going to be going to this facility or this location. Okay, so I know that's just a lot of information, but real quickly, let's transition over because I know I'm running out of time and I want to leave time for Q&A. But looking forward, again, as we've been seeing what's been going on, these type of aggressive immigration enforcement activities are certainly not going to be, they're gonna continue this year. And I would imagine we're gonna see them in many locations, especially now that we've got funding, and of course that may change depending upon the current environment here with funding of DHS and them currently being shut down as they debate the budget that ICE and CBP are going to be getting in the future. But we do know through the One Big Beautiful Bill that they got significant amount of money for these enforcement actions. And so we do know that they are still significantly funded and do plan to continue to conduct a lot of these aggressive enforcement activities. So again, be prepared, to see these increased likelihoods that, you may have employees that are going to be subject to detention or removal, especially since they are using AI and other tools to scrap databases, and look for any kind of criminal activity, look for them violating their status if they're working in jobs that they shouldn't be, if they're participating in things that they shouldn't be. We know social media scrapes. There's so much going on, and so just be prepared for that, for these types of activities to happen. We know that they're pushing these legal boundaries of wanting to gain access, right? And I've heard of several accounts of officers going into non-public space without the authority of the employer. And even when the employer is being vocal about that they don't consent to them entering in those spaces, we're still seeing ICE move into these spaces to conduct their enforcement activities. So again, really being prepared for what that's going to mean for your location and how you're going to respond if that happens. And then, of course, we're seeing more sentiment from employees who are pushing back, as we were talking about. They're asking, employers to be more vocal about being against what ICE is doing, stopping contracts that they may have with ICE if for whatever reason their company is supporting ICE operations or the enforcement operations. So we're just seeing sort of a new realm of employees now wanting to be more vocal, or having their companies be more vocal and be against what is happening. So I think quickly would be encouraging you all to let them know what you are doing, or how you're going to be supporting them, right? Letting them know that, hey, here's all that we plan to do. We will not allow them into non-public spaces. We will be asking them to provide any sort of warrant, right? We will not be consenting to them entering. Our main goal is to ensure the safety of the workplace as well as your safety as our employees. So we're seeing a lot of employers now feeling that they need to work with their employees and let them know. And one other thing is the video. We're also seeing a lot of employees want to start taking videos if they hear that ICE is on site. And again, we've seen that could cause a lot of chaos, because they're posting to social media right away. Then other employees in your facilities are seeing or hearing what's going on. But a lot of these are uh, 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 they're not confirmed that who the law enforcement is that's there. We're seeing it could be USCIS as opposed to ICE, and so it's causing a lot of chaos in the workplace where there may not necessarily need to be. So again, thinking about your operations and making sure that you're properly messaging to your employees how you're going to support, or how you're going to let them know if there is any sort of enforcement action that is going to be taking place, or that is taking place at your facility, to keep the temperature down and keeping people calm. I could talk all day about this, and I know I'm so out of time, but happy to share this deck. I have a lot more information, and happy to answer any questions that folks have. Thank you so much.
Oh, Kelly, thank you so much. Wow. We do have a couple questions, and I have one here from Lisa Romano, who says, if we are able to lock non-public areas, is that advisable to do?
I mean, definitely. I mean, that would be similar to a badge being required, right? Those doors are locked and you only allow folks in who have that badge. So certainly something that you can consider. The lock in and of itself wouldn't necessarily make it a, non-public space, but if you put a sign up saying that this is non-public and then that door remains locked and only employees have access to that, whether it's through a key or whether you have a security person there who's opening that door and letting people in, or a camera that opens the door, unsets the lock. You can certainly think about those, but definitely great ideas to think about what works best for your facility.
Okay. And I have one here from Bridget Peters. She's saying, thank you very much for this helpful information. I think this could be also you, Kamal. Could you please provide an update on what resources or programs in Maryland that may be currently being developed to assist immigrants in navigating their path to legal status?
Thank you for that. I would say a couple of things. One is we work very closely with organizations across the state that serve immigrants, whether it's providing legal services or other services. And we will soon make that available on our website. So that's in development, and we'll share the link with you all. And then two, for those individuals, and I know we didn't talk about this explicitly, but we also have a large number of individuals in the state of Maryland who have permanent residency. They're green card holders, but they've never taken the step to become U.S. citizens. Actually, we have 150,000 in the state of Maryland, which is a pretty high number per capita. And so on that front, we just recently actually launched an initiative called Citizenship Maryland to help connect those individuals to more directly to the resources they need, including pro bono legal assistance. Again, if they are interested in taking that step, and they are available. And so I can share more information about that as well.
Terrific. Thank you. Thank you very much. And I just want to let everyone know who's on here. Yes, you will be able to get a copy of this presentation and the slides, and the recording for future review. So, what a great hour of time spent actually educating our public as to what's going on. And we really appreciate this. What an incredible array of panelists. Senator Smith, Delegate Martinez, Secretary Addix, Kelly Dunning, and Kamal Essahab. Thank you so much for bringing this thoughtful and practical insights to today's conversation. And thank you for being part of this important conversation. Immigration policy does continue to evolve. And at the federal level, yet these changes have tangible implications for Maryland's workforce and all of our employers, especially our chamber members. And we value our ongoing partnership with the governor's office and appreciate their support in helping the Maryland business community stay informed and be prepared. A recording of this will all be sent to all registered participants later this week. And if we sign off, if you're interested in staying engaged on other policy topics affecting Maryland employers, we'd love to have you involved with the Maryland Chamber of Commerce if you are not already. And thank you for joining us. Please, we will post this stuff on our website at mdchamber.org. And I know you can go on Kamal's website with the governor's office also. And I just saw a ton of new messages come up here, but unfortunately, we have run out of time. And I appreciate everyone today. Thank you so much.